Hi everyone, we're going to be starting in probably about a minute or so, just letting a few more people through the lobby. We're going to kick off in just a moment, just waiting for the last few people to get in, and then we'll get going. Thanks. Right, I think we've got most people in that we're expecting at the moment. So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's session on security, very much focused on how we can articulate your security baseline, what that means and how you can break through it and why that's really important to you. So today you've got myself, Mark Rotherham. I'm BCN's Chief Technology Officer. I've been at BCN over 2.5 years now. A lot of background in IT and security, but not quite as much as Simon. So I'm going to let Simon just do a quick intro of himself as well.
Afternoon, yep, Simon Edwards. So I've been working for MSPs for about 20 years, been with BCN, sort of through a previous acquisition for about 10 in total now. So I look after the team that's responsible for delivering our security services to our clients.
Thanks, Simon. So today we're going to take you on a little bit of a security journey. I love talking about journeys. The idea with today's session is to give you a little bit of an update on what's going on in the world, give a bit of a UK perspective on cyber and posture and some of the things that are quite interesting that are going on at the moment. And then we're going to get stuck into what we're talking about. What is a security baseline and why should you care about it and what can you do to understand it if you don't today and get to a point where you're happy with where you are effectively. We're going to break that down into some reasons why, some examples, and then give you some insights as to the things you should be doing or considering to increase your security baseline before we wrap up with some Q&A. So I'm going to get started with a little bit of a cyber update. So I've kind of chosen 3 topics to kind of quickly summarize and kind of give a point of view on. The first one is a little bit of what's going on from a UK perspective, from a cyber posture point of view. Now, there's a lot of reports, a lot of insights available to answer kind of this question, but I've chosen one little set of analysis that the UK government have done with Microsoft to kind of give a point of view as to right now where are organisations across the UK from a security perspective, and there is a trend, and the trend is that we're getting worse effectively as a set of businesses across the UK, and that doesn't necessarily mean that we're not investing as much as we were previously in security. In some cases, we might be investing a little bit more, but what's happening is that we're being overtaken by the threats. So the threats are getting more prevalent. There's more out there. They're quicker. They're more efficient. They're powered by AI. So generally, our posture as companies across the UK is getting worse. And as you can see here, the current state of play on this particular report shows that only 13% of organisations a resilient security posture that can fend off the current wave of targeted attacks that are kind of hitting us in the UK. So there is another perspective on this where over time we do get, I think, the word saturated with some of the security messages. It feels like this is a drum that we beat all the time. It's a little bit relentless, and sometimes people think that they've done enough and they can pause. But I think one of the key underpinning things here is security never stops. Cyber attacks are only increasing. So whilst it can feel like an underinvested place in some areas, it's really important to understand where you are and measure off your appetite for security risk. So I thought that was a good starting point, just to give like a current view of the UK world. And you can click through on this slide to that actual article where I got that from if you want to read into it a little bit more after the presentation. Now, the next thing that I wanted just to kind of put on here is that your data is for sale. And what I mean by that is there are entire groups of individuals across the globe whose sole intent is to harvest information. They don't try and hack. They don't try and extort or crypto or anything like that. Their job in life is to effectively go and find out information about companies. Any company with a revenue of above $1 million a year is in their crosshairs. And what they do is they basically find out everything they can about a company's IT infrastructure. They'll do lots of scanning, lots of searches, and they end up with this portfolio of information about companies. It could be anything from the vendors that they use to provide firewalls or network switches or CCTV to IP addresses. And this information turns upon the dark web in effectively a market where people can bid and buy information based on vulnerabilities that are available at this moment in time. So this is making the attack possibilities much easier because they're commoditizing your data and making it available for people to go and consume and do stuff with. And this data, it is absolutely critical for hackers. As a new vulnerability gets found, they can literally cross-reference this data, bid for information against companies that have got that vulnerability, and then go down the next step of the kind of cyber hacking chain and pass it on to people that will actually do hacking and things like that. So this is an actual screenshot of prices and size of companies and bids that have been going in on the dark web for data. And depending on what your company is, how externally facing it is, what kind of information they can find, and the potential of extortion, depends on how much value this data is to those potential hackers. So I just wanted to show that it's an interesting insight into how some of these attacks are facilitated by different organizations. And it is also really interesting to know that I think there's about 8 or 9 different steps in the cyber chain, and this is just one of them. And there's many steps, of which one of the steps is actually encrypting data and potentially taking it away. But there's a raft of steps in between, like finding vulnerabilities, working out how to exploit them, working out to deploy malware. And this is just one of those many steps that are being used in the arsenal of the attackers. Now, the last bullet point I've got on here, and I've mentioned it in the intro, is a little bit around AI-generated attacks. Now, this is, I guess, one of the most worrying parts of what we're observing in the cyber world at the moment. Previously, there was a lot of manual attacks, manually crafted phishing emails, manually developed malware and password cracking. What we're seeing now is this new era of AI being extremely accessible to cyber criminals, and they're using all of the power of AI that we like to see as doing good. And if you follow any of my posts on LinkedIn, there is a lot of awesome stuff we can do with AI, but this is being homed to be harmful and to try and damage businesses and to get in effectively. So that the increase in AI being used in this area is having a significant impact on the percentage of businesses that are vulnerable. And towards the end of today's presentation, we'll be able to talk about how you can start to use AI to fend off AI. And that's all part of the kind of journey. But I think that the key takeaway for me is we are seeing this impact. It's impacting us by having more companies more vulnerable. The data is out there. AI is helping get this data as well, and it's being fed into AI ecosystems throughout this whole cyber kill chain that are going to be focused on businesses in the UK to try and extort, encrypt, and basically damage the UK businesses. So that's kind of a little bit of an opening just to set the scene as to kind of why we want to talk about the security baseline and why we're quite passionate about increasing it and getting all of you to a point where you're comfortable with it. So I'm going to flip on to the next slide and just talk a little bit about why we talk about a security baseline and what it is. So I've drawn two axes on here. The first one is risk reduction going up on the left. And the bottom one is investment going along to the right. And the idea here is that the further you invest along the right, the better risk reduction you're going to have. And the main narrative I'm going to play into this is you should all know or have a plan to understand where you sit from a cyber security baseline perspective. That's something that if you don't know today, you should all work on a plan to basically understand, and we'll go through a little bit of how to do that as we go through. And then once you've done that, you need to look at your risk appetite and pair that off with your security budget. Everyone on this call will have a different point of view on that. Some will have a low risk tolerance, some will have a high, some will have a low security budget, some will have a high one. But the key thing to do is you've got to map your risk appetite and your security budget to where you are today and where you want to be tomorrow, to reduce that risk profile. So that's kind of the underpinning narrative between these two axes. And the goal really is to map out where you're on this journey. And I've kind of just put four simple kind of layers in here to start off with to kind of paint that picture. So as we go through this presentation, we're going to articulate what these different layers represent and give you some examples of why they're important, why you should consider them, but also paint the picture of these are building blocks. You know, the idea is that if you've not covered off your base, you know, number one as it is on here, then there's no point really jumping to number 2 or 3 or 4. Yeah, you've got to build from solid, secure foundations, and the investment compounds over time. So getting the first layer done sets you on a good position. It closes most of your security doors, and as you go up the stack, you close more of the doors to the point where you're as secure as you can be. I'm now just going to go through a very high-level summary of what 1, 2, 3, and 4 are, and then we're going to do a quick poll for you guys to put where you think you might be today before we kind of go through some of the details. So the idea is just to have a think about what kind of level you think you are today on this poll that'll pop in a moment. Now, number 1 on this list is effectively patching systems and having systems that are in support. So if you've got anything legacy in your environment, or if you've got systems that aren't being patched, then you've not achieved that baseline. If you are doing those things, then you've got number 1 cracked. The next one is number 2, securing your systems. So have you got systems that you've secured consciously? You've closed doors, you've applied policies, and you're comfortable that you've got a level of security across your infrastructure. Next one up is number 3, and it's around the human element. Do you have plans to train and keep people up to speed with security? Are you fending off the human risk effectively? And number 4, top of the tree, is are you able to fend off zero-day hacks? Have you got automation? Have you got logging? Have you got things that are effectively going to stop attacks in their footstep as they're trying to get into your system? So that's a very quick overview of the 4. We are going to go into more detail, but before we go there, it'd be good just to put the poll up and let you guys have a very quick, just, you know, submit which level you think you're at, and we'll compare that to how you guys think at the end once we've gone through some more of the detail. So I'm just going to give you a moment to do that. it should be really quickly, and it should be all in front of you now. You just need to choose the one you think you're at, and hit submit. Okay, so I've got the results in front of me as they stand at the moment, and I think the overwhelming majority of you at the moment, 68%, think that you're roughly at level 2. We've got 20% think you're at level 3 and 8% at level 4. So we're going to look at that. And we're going to go through a bit of the detail and then see how that compares towards the end of the webinar today. Thankfully, at the moment, only 4% are at level 1, and I put that just to test out that it was working as well. So I'm in that 4%. So I'm just going to move on one step now. So we've talked about a baseline. So what I want to do now is kind of overlay where we think your baseline should be. So effectively, it should be somewhere above 2, bleeding into number 3. And the idea with this is we want you to have a security baseline that will mean attackers move on to easier targets. Yeah, it means you've made enough of an investment in your security system to look at your competitors, look at other companies around you and say, actually, I think I'm ahead of the curve there, and I'm going to put off those cyber criminals from attacking my business because I've made that right investment. But if they do try and attack, you've also covered off all of the fundamentals, the basis, and you should be able to detect that, and it should be stopped in its tracks. So that's what I call the baseline. And from my perspective, it's the minimum kind of level of security we should be trying to get to as businesses across the UK. If we fall below it, then the chances of something causing us problems is significant. And we'll tie into kind of a little bit about how we really want to encourage people to get to this point, because it benefits everyone. Every security incident is hugely disruptive, and I'm just going to let you know that the whole point here is get to that point where you're above the baseline, and you've made that investment in security that you're comfortable with. So I'm going to move forward now and hand over to Simon just to start going through these layers in a bit more detail, and unpick them and give a few examples of kind of things that we've seen and observed across UK businesses and broader as well, to kind of paint the picture of what they mean.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. So we've kind of broken these down into 4 areas. Obviously, you can see how they're sort of named there. If I sort of kick off with number 1, obviously being sort of unpatched and legacy systems. So ultimately, we know, there are lots of reasons why you may have a legacy system still in place. Many organisations still rely on legacy systems due to their irreplaceability, and the fact that a lot of core enterprise applications still continue to run on them. Typically legacy solutions no longer receive support updates, security patches, and then that, as a result of that, of course, means that they become prime targets ultimately for cyber attacks that could then lead on to your sort of entire network or infrastructure being compromised. Hackers will also actively exploit end of support dates to uncover sort of unpatched vulnerabilities because they know that the vendors aren't gonna patch them. I think an obvious one that kind of comes to mind back in I think it was like 2017 when the NHS was compromised. I think it was WannaCry. It was obviously kind of one of the well sort of reported ones that ended up costing them, something like in the region of 9 to 10 million. So yeah, that's a good example of that one. Number 2, being unsecure systems. So this, for me, is kind of where you have more of a traditional system versus more of a proactive kind of measure, and that's kind of where that comes in. So historically, users will be provided access to shares information via security groups. Typically these groups are very difficult to manage, not maintained well. Users were given temporary kind of rights and they're not removed again, and then you have the complication of NTFS and share permissions, and just generally always just a bit of a nightmare to manage, especially with in larger environments. So this is where something like more of a zero trust approach would come in. And in my opinion, based on what I've seen, this is where organizations should be looking as a direction of travel. So zero trust, it will provide enhanced security. So by granting access strictly on a need to know basis, so therefore instantly effectively minimizing the attack surface. So it just becomes substantially more challenging for potential intruders to gain unauthorized access. It also provides sort of improved visibility and control. So it provides granular visibility across the entire organization. It just sort of, enables better monitoring and control over user behavior and device interactions. Obviously, reduced risk of insider threats as well. So this minimises the reduced insider threats by limited access privileges. So even authenticated users are continuously reassessed, just preventing unauthorised lateral movement within the environment, really. So we use a product called Threat Locker internally and with quite a few of our clients as well. So Threat Locker achieves that for us ultimately. Next up, human error. I mean, to be honest with you, these are labeled 1, 2, 3, 4, but they're effectively all as important as each other. So human error, obviously another kind of common one. So nearly half of the breaches in EMEA, I think it's about 49%, are actually initiated internally. So of course this suggests high instances of privilege misuse ultimately, and other human kind of related mistakes. So obviously some of the more common kind of scenarios will be where credentials being compromised. It will just be through threat actors exploiting human laziness ultimately, and mistakes. And just capitalizing on weak passwords, reuse credentials, and just poor kind of security practice ultimately. You also got social engineering and phishing as well, and then sort of just fatigue countermeasures ultimately. So unlike computers, humans do tire. Although my laptop sometimes has days like that, but prolonged work hours, it just all of that sort of stuff. It just all increases, the likelihood of errors ultimately. And then number 4, we've got zero-day hack. So what is a zero-day? A zero-day vulnerability exists in an operating system or an application or even a device actually from the moment it's released. But the software vendor or hardware manufacturer isn't aware of the vulnerability. So the vulnerability can be there all along. It just hasn't been detected. And as I say, it could have been in place for days, weeks, months, years. It's just no one's ever sort of picked up on it. Of course, in an ideal world, you want security researchers or software developers to be able to pick up on this first. However, the problem comes in where the hackers ultimately the bad actors identify the vulnerability first, and at that point it's a race effectively. So the security professionals are working on then trying to develop a fix to address that and close that vulnerabilities, whereas the bad actors are then trying to develop a zero-day exploit to take advantage and leverage that. And more often than not, hackers can actually develop exploits quicker than the security teams can create those patches. So there's sort of some of the challenges, and that touches on what Mark was saying earlier about the threat actors, the bad actors being able to sort of outpace almost the rest of us.
Yeah, I think, Simon, I'm just going to go through each one and just give a real life simple example of ones that we've seen recently, just to really paint that picture. So, number 1, the unpatching legacy systems. We've seen hacks occur through really simple mechanisms. So we're aware of businesses that have got a legacy system that their business operates on, but they thought it was okay. They thought they didn't have to worry about it because it was inside their network perimeter. and they thought that they had all the controls in place to stop people getting in and actually using that as a platform to bring other attacks in. So they'd done some of the right things there. They'd recognised that there was a threat. They'd secured their network with firewalls. But inside, they had this extremely vulnerable system that could be exploited. They knew that it was going to cost quite a lot of money to get off it, which is why they'd almost put it to the back of their mind. You know, it's a thing. We know it's a problem. We've done some defences, so let's just accept the risk and move on. Now, at some point, not so long after that, they installed a new CCTV system, which needed a firewall port opening into their infrastructure. It was open, nothing untowards there, but that CCTV system got hacked, and the hackers got straight through the firewall because the port was open into that infrastructure and managed to land and basically cause issues. So you can put some mitigating factors in legacy systems to try and protect. You've got to be really careful about maintaining and controlling that, and there should always be a plan to remove it over time. It can be costly because IT does make these upgrades hard, but you know it's number one for a reason. There are vulnerabilities found on legacy systems. They're unsupported. Same with unpatched. You know, the patches are there for a reason. The second one is a really simple one. You know, Sam talked a load about zero trust and policies and things like that. So you will all be aware of something called MFA, multi-factor authentication. It's great. You know, you apply the policy, everyone has multi-factor authentication, and it provides a really good level of security. However, one slight misconfiguration of that, as in you configure it for everyone at the business today, but you don't turn it on for new starters automatically, and you've got a hole. All of a sudden you have a security posture that's getting worse over time because your policy just isn't quite right. And that's quite an extreme example of how a good approach, good methodology, good security decision can unravel itself without the right policy management. And what we're seeing across the whole of the kind of policy ecosystem is the policies change over time. New things are enabled, turned on, and if you don't go and turn them on, you're not going to be as secure as you can be, or you might end up with configuration drift that actually just ends up with you being more insecure over time. So that MFA one's, again, a really simple example of where you've kind of done the right thing, but without the right checks and balances in your policies and controls there, you can leave the door open. The human error example is a really simple one. Yeah, we can go into the depths of how AI is going to be writing really intricate phishing emails that are tailored to you, but we don't need to do that. It's as simple as one of your staff picks up a USB stick that they found in the car park and they plugged it into your computer. Yeah, again, there's policy and controls that can stop that. You can lock down USB, but that's quite restrictive. But a little bit of training that says that's actually a really good attack vector for a criminal. You know, you could go around car parks and business estates, drop down USBs with malware on them, and unwitting people just plug them in and away it goes. Now, if you've invested in this human vector area, you will have either trained people, you'll have got policies in place, or you'll even have things like a clean laptop that's not connected to the network where you can plug it in and actually check what's going on there before it has any problems. So that one's is an easy example. The last one's really tricky. Yeah, zero-day hacks are hard. I'm not going to go into details of too many of those because thankfully we don't see lots of people getting zero-dayed, but the way that this is going to change over time is the AI power behind it. So for a while now, we've kind of said the baseline is below this level, yeah, because historically, yes, there are zero-day hacks, and yes, you want to know, but it's not been the most prevalent. It's not been the biggest thing hitting us. All those things we just talked about before are more important to get right first. What we're seeing now is the AI power behind these hitting us, and I'm really going to talk about the defence here. The defence is having AI going on in your environment to identify when you have been hacked and really reduce the time to detect something that's going on and the time to remediate. And that's all going deep into automation. It's getting all the logs into what's known as a SIEM, a central logging area. It's having the automation that looks across all those and detects a bad actor before it's too late and helps you lock them out. So that 0 day hack has been above our baseline for a little while, but it's definitely something to keep an eye on as we go forward. And some businesses feel the need to absolutely invest in that now, and that's a good thing because it's showing that we're ready to fend off the next wave of cyber attacks into our businesses.
I think the 0 day thing is quite a good example of why you potentially never be at 100% secure, because something like a 0 day is very difficult to always be one step ahead. It's almost impossible.
Yeah, exactly. And it's literally investing in defense mechanisms and defense mechanisms you can trust. So I'm just going to click through the last bits of this slide because really what these next two bits just say is this is what they're trying to do. Yeah, so we're trying to stop these things happening. We're trying to stop cyber criminals steal data, encrypt your files, delete data, and generally cause damage. And we're trying to stop them doing that because it does hit your reputation. You can lose earnings, your data can be exposed, your IP can be leaked. But worst case, businesses shut down. And we have seen big businesses in the UK, even in the last few months, have to close effectively because of one bit of unsecure system and a human error. Yeah, all it takes is one thing to go in, and you can effectively have multi-million-pound revenue businesses close down. So it is really important to get to this point of fending these issues off. So next we're going to just jump into a little bit, and I'm going to let Simon take over again. But the idea isn't to go through all of these; it's just to paint a bit of the picture of what to consider.
Yeah, I think, thanks, Mark. So obviously I'm a little bit aware of time as well, so I won't sort of hang around on this one. But obviously we sort of touched on the security baseline a couple of slides back. Now, this particular slide just provides a bit more sort of meat around the bone and the 4 levels, as Mark was saying, of how we've kind of broken up and how we sort of see the maturity journey. So this is kind of how we've sort of mapped it out to help clients align themselves. So it's a very quick and easy way to measure where your organization may sit. We don't expect clients to tick every kind of line within each of those areas, but it certainly gives a good sort of high level overview of the technologies or services that you should be looking at to complement what you have in place already and what you should be looking at next. So it goes all the way from reactive, which was the bottom of the previous slide, and it will go all the way across up to embedded. Now, kind of at that embedded stage is kind of where we sort of start to see some AI sort of start to help us as well. And then you'll see there, that's kind of where our security baseline is right in the managed. So that's kind of where that's where we would like to see our clients sort of sat.
Yeah, and it's an interesting one. This slide and the contents changes, I'd say, fairly regularly as new capabilities come out to fend off attacks. So it's never going to be 100% complete. And as Sam says, there's some things in it that might not be relevant, but each one should be a consideration in your cyber journey as to, is it a thing that you need? Is it something you've considered? Or not. And I am going to call out a couple because there are a couple that are really good ones to get exposed to. One of them is the tabletop exercise. So we've run in partnership with CloudGuard, who provide our MXDR solution, some really good tabletop exercises where you get an opportunity to actually try and work through cyber scenarios based on how you would react with your business when things go bad. So that's a really good eye opener, and I definitely recommend a follow up on that if you've not done one before, just to kind of test where you actually are in maturity to the left. And the other one, is the MXDR. So this is becoming more and more relevant as we go forward. It's firmly in our kind of embedded camp, but this is where we can actually start to really see attacks as they hit, and answer questions like, well, when did it start, and what data did get taken, and when did that data get taken? Because today it's almost impossible without the right level of security investment to tell you whether data's left the environment or whether there is someone lurking in there that's not actually done anything bad yet. So just call them out. But yeah, we'll leave these slides available to you all to have a look through in your own time and to work through which ones you want to kind of consider. Now, that is a big list, and I think we're just going to kind of try and summarise an approach that we think is a good place to start if you're wondering where to go next. So again, I'm going to let Simon go through this next one.
So I'm sure if you've listened to one of our security podcasts or webinars, or even been to one of the in-person events, you're probably bored of listening to me talk about Cyber Essentials. Yes, ultimately we've got guys, internally within the team who are accredited advisors, and so yeah, we're in a great position to be able to sort of talk about Cyber Essentials. But ultimately, it doesn't actually really make any difference to us whether our clients have the Cyber Essentials certificate. Cyber Essentials is just, it's a bundle of procedures, practices, controls, and security measures, which ultimately that's what's really important to us, is that our clients have those controls in place. That's what's going to protect you, our client. It's not the certificate at the end of the day. Yes, okay, the certificate brings added value to partners and sort of clients, but recognizing that it's so that they can recognise that you as a business have taken those added steps. Now, by implementing the measures, you'll reduce your risk ultimately by up to sort of 80%. So that's kind of why we felt that having Cyber Essentials at the heart of our baseline was a good place to start ultimately.
Yeah, and I think it's worth just calling out, the Managed Defender on there is a pretty light touch approach to having EDR, which is effectively endpoint detection and response. So it's a level up from antivirus, and it's something we recommend all of the endpoints that we manage to have now, which gives us the opportunity to isolate a device if someone does click a phishing email or something like that. So the idea with the services underneath or the approach underneath are really just to get you to that level of good security quite quickly. Managed Intune is just around making sure your policy drift is controlled, and you have things like I covered before, MFA. If you want it, it's turned on, and policy is controlling it to make sure it's always there, no matter whether it's a new starter or not. And the others, removing legacy is fairly straightforward. Security awareness, it's a bit of training goes a long way. Having an approach, and even security awareness is evolving. We're going from the prescripted, everyone does the same, to tailored, to actually customized. So tailored would be based on your role, but in the future we'll have customized based on how good you are at security. If you're really good, then you'll not need as much, but if you clicking phishing emails, you might get more. So I'm going to
just met up with, just talking about security awareness, I actually met up with a business, a global business actually, turnover of multi-millions, and they did security awareness once a year. I was surprised to hear. So yeah, it's an important one, and the approaches are varied. So before we kind of start getting into a bit of the wrap up, I thought it'd be useful just to show this slide again, and we're going to just do another quick poll. And the idea here is, right, at the beginning, you didn't know as much about the levels and the things like that. So we can put the poll back up now. The idea is, right, has it changed? Do you think you're higher or lower than you were when you started this conversation?
It's just a simple barometer to see, how much, if any, we've helped with a bit of understanding on this kind of cyber journey that we're on. Let's give that a moment to go through, and then we'll move on to the. In fact, I'm going to move on to the next slide while you guys are still just finishing doing the poll. So Sam, do you want to quickly go over our cybersecurity pledge?
Yeah, so obviously we talked about the baseline, and now this is our pledge. So what is the BCN security pledge? So the BCN pledge is to help businesses, our clients, safeguard themselves against cyber threats ultimately, and risks by offering sort of best-in-class security solutions tailored to meet our clients' needs. So we obviously have a team of cybersecurity professionals. So they'll fall not under my team, but there's other teams as well that will help with that help empower our clients with the knowledge and the skills to enhance their cybersecurity awareness and resilience ultimately. So we have a vision, and that vision is ultimately to try and get to all of our clients, 100% of our client base, in line with our security baseline by the end of this year. Now, we're up for the challenge. This the pledge is on our website if you kind of want to read it in full and pop over to there. But yeah, that's our pledge.
Yeah, and you can actually click through on the icon in the top right hand corner. That'll take you through if you're interested to that. And I think just to kind of close this little bit, the question I'd ask is, as we go through this, do you know where your current baseline is? Yeah, have you got a good grasp of where your security posture is today? If not, then that should be something that you go and consider. And then it's pairing that off with your risk appetite and your budget. Yeah, you should be looking at, are you comfortable where you are today? If yes, brilliant. Yeah. If no, think about where you should be thinking about investing and how you're going to decrease that risk as it matches up to your budget. Now, I'm going to move into a little bit of Q&A now. So it is open to Q&A. I think I'm hoping that Alfie and Rowan and the team and Matthew are there to help gather questions as they come in. But to get the ball rolling, I think we've got a couple free ones. So Simon, you ask, I'll answer.
Yeah. So I say, whilst we're waiting for hopefully lots of testing questions to come in. So one of the common ones I suppose we get is, if I get hacked, should I pay the ransom?
Yeah, and this is a really interesting question, because a lot of people would like to think I could just pay it and they'll go away. Now, there's actually quite a lot of guidance from UK authorities on this, and the guidance is no, don't pay the ransom. But there's also good reasons for that, and I'm going to give a couple of fun ones. So I think it was about middle last year where the majority of the casinos in Vegas were all attacked. They were all hacked pretty much at the same time, and a bunch of them managed to recover. One of them, I think the story goes, they wanted to pay one attacker. They paid one attacker. He took his money, but didn't share it with the rest of the team. So they ended up continuing being hacked. So you end up with this scenario where, because there's multiple players in the arena, paying the ransom, you're paying criminals, and they may effectively cheat each other. And they'll come back 5 minutes later and hack you again. So even if you pay, there's no guarantee that they're going to be trustworthy. And that, the evidence is that they're not trustworthy people, and they won't do what you're saying. There's no guarantee that they're actually going to unlock you or give you their money back.
That's the problem, isn't it? Ultimately, you can pay them, but there's no guarantee you're going to get your money back, your data back, because actually a lot of the time you don't get your data back.
Yeah, exactly. We've got a couple of questions in the chat, so I'm going to cover those next. In fact, Sam, do you want to take the first one?
Yeah.
What's on Cyber Essentials versus Cyber Essentials Plus?
Yeah, so ultimately, the requirements for Cyber Essentials and Cyber Essentials Plus are technically the same. All the technical controls and all the policies and everything that you have to implement are exactly the same. The key kind of difference ultimately is that the Plus has to be externally sort of assessed and verified, and you have to apply for proof and evidence, and they'll want to remote onto a select number of machines and see that those controls and measures are in place themselves. So, of course, if it's a requirement for a tender or a supply chain or something like that, then that may be the driving factor behind why you need to go for a Plus. But ultimately, you know, for us, it's about you guys having those controls in place. So, in terms of a difference between CE and CE Plus, as far as we're concerned, it doesn't make any difference.
Yeah, it's just a different cost, isn't there, effectively? I'm going to go to the next one. So I'll answer this one. So Microsoft Recall, yeah. So this is a fun one, you know, and I love AI. I love all the clevers that are coming with it. But yeah, the fact stuff, for those of you who don't know, Recall is effectively capturing your screen permanently, so you can rewind and see what happened in the past. And it's to feed the AI. It's to help the AI learn what's going on and train and all that kind of stuff. So I think everyone in the security world looks at that and says, that's a really bad idea. My take on it is we need to kind of wait and see. Microsoft are the biggest security company in the world. Yeah, they invest a whole lot of money in security. And so we'll have to see what kind of controls they put in place around that. I know they've already said you can opt out and turn it off, and if you have it on, it won't do it in private windows and things like that. But still, yeah, I think there's a wait and see on that one to see how they demonstrate the security of that capability.
They said at the moment, haven't they? I think the data is all going to stay local on the machine. that doesn't mean it can't be compromised.
Yeah, exactly. So next one, around do BCN offer service where we'll come in and train end users. Do you want to cover that one, Simon?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we've got the our KnowBe4 training, which is obviously our security awareness training. But yeah, obviously we've got services around. Obviously, it depends on the topic. If it is around cybersecurity, then absolutely we can do that. Yeah, maybe Martin, maybe we'll reach out to you afterwards to see if there's a specific topic you want to cover, and we can see if we can help with that.
Yeah, it's a good answer. I mean, I think that one we could tailor something. We could look at something, but our out of the box is we offer great user education services, and we can help you configure and deploy those. So next one's a fun one, yeah, and this is from Anne. Absolutely, we're seeing the same thing, a massive increase in phishing. AI is powering this generation. It's getting smarter, and yeah, some of the traditional players are going to find it hard, because if you look at what's happening with OpenAI, they've now got 169,000 AI applications on their store, and they're just the nice good ones. Yeah, their entire platform's open to every hacker to go and use however they want, and it's very quick. Yeah, AI is moving at such a pace, and generative AI especially, so it's becoming easier for the attackers to be quicker than us almost, and quicker than some of our partners. So what we're doing is looking at how our partners are starting to embed AI into their platforms to fend these things off. And there are alternatives to Mimecast, and I think I know of at least one which is starting to look at using AI in a way to do that. So again, I think that's something that is a follow-up where we can look at potential alternatives. And I'm not going to lie, this is kind of new stuff that we're talking about here. The traditional spam and phishing protection is being disrupted by AI, and the investment that these companies have to make is going to be disrupted as well for them to fend it off. So yeah,
I think that's why, you know, we sort of touched on zero trust as well. You know, we're never going to get completely ahead of the game, and some of them are always going to get through, but ultimately if you kind of got those next level controls in place to stop anything from happening, if they did hit on one of those links, then yeah, we should be looking at that as well.
Yeah. So there's a couple of other people that had the same issue with the spam, and yet egress, there's different methods of approaching that problem. Let's go to Phil. It isn't easy to upgrade multi-million-pound OT systems that have legacy systems embedded. Would this be an issue obtaining Cyber Essentials? I think the answer is yes. it would have an issue. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to go into a bit more detail there, Simon?
Yeah, I think, Cyber Essentials, ultimately, they're looking to ensure that everything is patched, up to date, supported. And so if you do have an application that's no longer supported by the vendor, or, then actually you sort of touched on it earlier with the sort of legacy systems piece. We have clients who have applications, legacy applications, are still utilizing Log4j. There's nothing they can do about it. That application requires Log4j to run. It can't be upgraded. It is what it is. But because of that, they can't have CE. So yeah, it's a challenge. It is a challenge.
And that's all the questions that have come in now. So I think if we just flip on to the last couple of questions we pre-canned, and then we'll see if there's any more coming before the end. So this one I kind of put in is kind of what's a point of view from the experts. So as I mentioned, we partner with CloudGuard. They're an amazing AI-based detection and threat isolation company that we work with all around threat protection. So they get to see a lot of what's going on in the field. So I asked, what are the kind of key lessons that they'd bring to this conversation? So the first one was assume it will happen. It's really a really bad way to start, but think about what could happen and assume it will happen. What you're going to do about it. They've seen an increase of insider threats, and this is basically down to the zero trust thing. There's a lot of bad actors in companies. There's a lot of disgruntled staff. If you make it easy for them to do something maliciously or by accident, then that's not good. So they're seeing an increase of insider threats causing the issue rather than bad actors trying to get in independently. They recognise that should be looking at single points of failure and have multiple defences in place. The new measure in the industry is really around speed to recovery. Yeah, so how quickly can you recover? And that will kind of dovetail into the last question that we've got. Don't assume you can recover data from backups is another one. Everyone assumes that because they've got backups, they're covered. If you've got backups, the first thing attackers will tend to do is go and delete them or encrypt them or do something bad, which is why it's really important to look at immutable backup options or different defenses in there. And the last one that they're fed in is the fundamental one. Invest in continually improving your cybersecurity. Yeah, and if you do nothing, you will be going backwards. Yeah, your policies deteriorate over time. The attackers are getting better, so don't stand still.
I sort of cringe at myself when I hear myself saying it, but unfortunately, I say it all the time, but it's true. It is unfortunately a matter of when and not if.
Yeah. And then we put one last question because it's relevant. Yeah. And it's relevant because of some of the observations we've had in the last 6 months of companies that have been attacked. So this one is, you're insured, you've got cyber insurance. What do you do? And we are not going to advise specifically one way or the other because this is more a talking point and points of view. Yeah. There's 2 points of view here. The first one is you've got your cyber insurance, you should ring them up and follow what they say. And that isn't a bad point of view. You're following a path of using your insurance for what they're designed to do. The only downside to that path is the speed of recovery. So as I've just mentioned, speed of recovery is a measure. You may find that your cyber insurance isn't the quickest way to recover, although it is one where you can get some potential money back after the attack. The other way is to just recover as quickly as you can, lock down systems, isolate, and start a recovery plan as soon as something has happened. Now, I say these are points of view, and they are points of view. They're definitely things you need to consider in your cyber planning. If you get attacked and you've got insurance, what is your plan? Do you know how long it's going to take for them to engage, to bring experts in, to do everything that they need to do? Or do you have a plan that says, actually, great, we've needed to have it, but we need our business back as quickly as soon as possible. If they're not going to be quick enough, then we need a plan that does it in a different way. It's definitely
I was just going to say, I think this is where an IR plan comes in, which is really important, because when that moment happens, you're not going to be in a position to be trying to make these decisions. You need to know prior what your plan is and what you're going to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's all, you know, those tabletop exercises I mentioned before are really good ways of uncovering what you should do and what ifs, you know. If you, I'm not going to go in more details, we've run out of time, but there's a lot of things to consider there. And some companies actually decide not to buy cyber insurance and just to put the money in a pot just in case and use that pot to pay for recovery in that scenario. I think there was one other question that just popped into the chat as we were closing. So from Jonathan Miller, how much resource do BCN have dedicated to cyber recovery should one of your customers suffer an issue? So we do occasionally have customers that haven't got to a baseline that we're comfortable with that do have an issue. We don't have a standing army of cyber specialists that that are just waiting for these things to happen. But what we do have is the right skills to apply to customers in these scenarios, and we have got great cyber teams that have got playbooks of how to isolate, how to disinfect, how to recover based on what we're seeing. So I think how much resource is a tough one to ask, because we put the resource that's needed on the problem when we have the problem. But yeah, it's unfortunately a playbook we need, and we've had to enact on a couple of times, and which is why we're here today saying we really want all of our customers to not be in that scenario and to have a security baseline that doesn't need a cyber recovery. And with that, I'm going to close. I don't think there's any more questions in. So thanks, Simon, for being here today and helping give your insights. I hope everyone found it useful and insightful. Again, feel free to follow up through the account managers or through the website if you've got any questions. And yeah, hopefully you work out where your baseline is and make it better.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Yes.